Hey, what's up, folks? All right. Today is going to be a bit unusual. So today we're going to be looking over BoshNRoll's video where he played some goblins. So somebody subscribed to his Patreon, I believe, requested goblins as the deck of the day and didn't specify a deck list. So Brian reached out to me and said, like, hey, do you got a goblins list for me? I sent him this. Basically what I've just been playing in leagues past year or so, maybe 2 weeks by this point. And I think this is like a really interesting opportunity because Goblins community is a bit segregated from the rest of the Legacy community in that it has a lot of people who only play Goblins and has a lot of newer players or budget players or more casual players. And so there's this small group of like super diehards and then a larger group of more casual players. And so there's very little kind of cross pollination from other legacy decks, other legacy communities. And so when I'm, teaching the deck, I do have blind spots because there's certain things that are sort of just like accepted at this point. It's like the discussion has happened. The discussion may have happened 10 years ago. Why is it like this? And, we don't go over it. But, then when we're explaining the deck to new people, there's kind of unspoken things that we just don't think about. We just don't think about explaining because it is the way it is. And watching Coval's video is a really good way to see how someone who's very good at Legacy, but is not a specialist in the deck, and generally prefers, Coval's got kind of the brand of being a control mage. He's got a history of being a control mage, blue control. So this is outside of his wheelhouse. He played Goblins like a long time ago. Yeah, and he's played against it a decent bit, but not so much experience being a pilot, and not in the current era. He's played Turbo Muxus, he's played Wild Goblins from probably like 15 years ago or something. So I thought his video was pretty interesting, and there's a lot to talk about. So I asked him, it'd be cool to go over his video, and he said, yeah, sure, of course. So let me just test audio levels because I do want to get. I guess we'll have
Goblin Trashmaster, very cool tool. One of the more recent additions to the deck. Goblins get +1/+1, so it's a Lord, and sack a Goblin, destroy an artifact. Lots of artifacts kicking around this format.
So how?
Shellick Mons, also one of the more recent additions. 3-mana 2/2. When the Shellick or an End of the Void, they hide him in.
All right. Now it's too low for him? Okay.
Okay, here we go. Min says, hi, YouTube.
Okay. That probably should be good. Okay, cool. So the way I think I'll do this is we'll just like watch and I'll commentate. I might save his audio for specific moments to double check, like, if he makes a certain play, we might go back and see what he was saying, so it's not just playing all the time, because then it gets like confusing. So we'll check his explanations for plays that are worth checking, because I want to see what he's thinking, right? That's part of the exercise, is to figure out, what are the heuristics of a Legacy player who's not used to Goblins transferred to playing Goblins. So round one's against Min. Hello, Min. Yeah. Opening hands and sideboarding is definitely gonna be the primary ones. Colonel Crabcake. So speaking of opening hands,
Do anything until turn 3. Know that this hand has what we need. Like, it literally doesn't do anything until turn 3. Don't even have a cavern to make those things happen. No Aether Vial to take up value. I'm gonna mulligan this.
yep. I think this is like a pretty borderline hand. But and that's only because you kind of expect Min to be playing more of a controlling deck, just on average. But even against control, this hand's not great. Just because, as he said, no cavern, no vial. Port would be a nice bridge. If we had a turn 2 port into a turn 3, one of these, it's better. If we had a Mog War Marshal, this hand's probably keepable. But oh man, that's loud. Oh man, that's okay. That's just in my ears. 22 months, Gobnik, Twitch Prime. Thanks for coming by. Was that as loud to me or as everyone else as it was to me? Because it was very loud in my ears. But that's just because my computer body volume is turned up. I don't want to really be weirdly balanced. Not too loud. Okay. All right. Cool. So yeah, Brian correctly mulligans this hand.
Hi YouTube. Everybody say hi to Min.
I'm in.
Okay, here we go.
All right. So this hand's pretty obvious keep. And what you put back is interesting. It's kind of like between the most expensive and the least expensive card. Have I chested Gemstone Cavern? It's not a card to play in the deck. I think we tested it got tested like a long time ago. But so I think Skirk Prospector or Ringleader. So the Prospector kind of is better if the Vial doesn't stick. And improves the quality of your top decks somewhat. Keeping the Ringleader is better if you draw lands and if it's a slower game. And the Ringleader is also really good at the Vial sticks. I think we've got Vial to double 2-drop on turn 3. So the expert's pretty likely to hit a thing if you need to hit a thing. So I like putting the Prospector back, and I think that's what he does.
I also know Min.
Back the Prospector, cool, yeah. Do I think Snoop Combo Package is a good choice for Goblins Legacy? No. Not. Yeah, unless it's Food Chain, yeah. So here's Tundra Prismatic Ending. Wasteland. So here, you can take the shot of Wasteland Path and hope your opponent doesn't have a second land, but that's pretty dubious, right? We don't know, sometimes you can get a read of Tundra. Using Tundra could mean that you don't have many lands because you'd prefer to lead on basic, but we don't know if Min's deck plays basics or not yet. So that's not really a signal. So Cavern Pile Driver here, pretty straightforward. Okay, so he goes for the Wasteland. So, I mean, I think that's a risk to take, given that you've got the 4-drop in your hand, because the reason I like playing the Cavern Pile Driver is that you can then go Expert plus Wasteland next turn, or if you draw a 4th land, you can just decline to Wasteland altogether, because then you're going to curve into your Ringleader on turn 4. So you just don't know if this Wasteland is good yet. You love the Wasteland here, force them to fetch basics, but you don't know if they play basics. It's like a total toss-up on whether or not this Wasteland actually does anything. And it could be actively bad for you because if you draw a third land but not a fourth land for a long time, the ringleader is gonna get stuck, and presumably against a Tundra deck, you're gonna want to be casting your ringleader. So see, so you play Pile Driver. Thing is, it's like most Tundra decks don't have good 2-drops, and like even if Min was playing like Stoneforge Mystic, then you have Expert for Stoneforge. So yeah, I'm pretty confident you just play Pile Driver last turn, and then if he didn't do anything on this turn, you would play Matron. Other land. Matron for Matron. Matron for like War Chief. Another Wasteland. Kind of interesting. I mean, you don't know nothing. You know it's a Tundra deck. You know it's a Tundra deck, and they're not doing very much. So what does that say? Reactive spells that easily could have Plow here. Monastery Mentor, Expressive Iteration. So now I think Brian sees the correct role, right? Is that you want to get on board a little bit more before you start wastelanding again. So now the Matron comes down instead of wastelanding again. The Matron choice is interesting. I think he goes for War Chief. I agree with. Because it kind of just like so the Pile Driver has to die, right? We know the Min has to kill the Pile Driver. So that means if there's any cantrips involved, Min's got a decent chance of not having mana up, only having 1 mana up next turn. So if you draw a 4th land, you can draw a Step Wasteland plus War Chief. Keep the pressure on. See what he's thinking.
Here's the tricky part.
See what he says on the
opens up the possibility for future wastelands. Here's the tricky part. Do I know what to do with my tutors? And Ringleader is the best card, I think. War Chief sets up a lot of powerful things against the control deck. I'm not ready for Pashalik. It would suck to tutor up a Ringleader and then just not draw land and do nothing.
Yep.
I think I want War Chief.
Yeah.
Yeah, War Chief can bring the ruckus.
Yeah, it's sort of just like, we have card draw and we have a removal spell. So what is this hand missing? Is like a follow-up threat is when this Pile Driver dies, and War Chief is the follow-up threat that's also going to make this Ringleader castable even if you use your Wasteland.
Next turn, attacking with 3 goblins.
So it kind of facilitates the Ringleader plan and Pile Driver plan at the same time. And the Wasteland. Wasteland better. Brainstorm. Fetch Volk. Murktide. So Murktide, so there's a Jeskai Murktide deck of some variety. So here's where you want to draw Step Stop. It's like exactly the situation. This is literally peak I want draw Step Stop. So you draw Step Stop, and then you draw your Cavern. It's like, okay, what are we gonna do? So basically, you got two real choices here. You can either ignore the Wasteland for a turn, Ringleader, see what you hit, and then try to go like War Chief Expert the next turn if you draw another land, or if you hit any 2-drops off of your Ringleader, you can do that without a land, any 1 or 2 drops. And then the alternative is draw a step, waste the Tundra, see what happens. If Min spends the Plow on the Pile Driver, that means you got a pretty decent shot of your War Chief surviving, which means you can then Ringleader on the following turn. If Min doesn't, then you just play War Chief, attack for 1. You could try to swing and you get an attack in for 6, but you'd lose your war chief. But I think that's a bad trade. So he just like he can't really do that just because the stops don't work. Like he could wasteland here, and it's like okay, but I think the ringleader is like pretty reasonable. Definitely don't hate this either, because if you don't have another land, it's like kind of bad. So you hit 2 1-drops. So okay. So here's the thing: with 2 1-drops, we do need another red source. So explain the stop thing. So you wasteland in your draw step, so that Min doesn't get to see how you use your mana in your first main phase before you do it, right? Because if you wasteland your main phase, they have float white. It's like okay, pass. You pass priority, and then opponent also passes, either casts a plow or does nothing, and then your war chief is in play. I guess in this exact circumstance, you're not planning on attacking with the war chief anyway, so it doesn't it wouldn't affect this combat step exactly. If the board was a little bit bigger, Marceline, thanks for the follow. If the board was a little bit bigger and you're going to attack with a pile driver, if there is not plow represented, then it's more relevant, because then it's just like I'm only attacking with this pile driver if there isn't plow up, and that's what the draw step stop is really relevant. Yeah. All right, so ringleader hit 2, and then we've got. So lackey's actually kind of interesting because war chief plus lackey could sneak the expert into play to kill the Murktide. Yeah. So in this situation, the problem isn't that you don't want damage; it's just that you don't want to trade out bodies, because an expert can kill a 5/5 Murktide like pretty reasonably, especially with the way the hand looks. So
Opponent, but still draw 2 cards. And it bottom the lands that I now no longer want. Now I have this choice of I could turn all my creatures sideways, lose the ringleader, deal 5/6 to my opponent, or I could try to hold back and do like a big lackey prospector munitions expert kind of turn next turn. Kind of think I want to push damage. I get blown out pretty bad by Swords to Plowshares. I'm in. Let's party.
yeah. So I think this is just a little bit too aggressive. Life totals are still very high. 6 damage is good, but the cost is really high on losing the ringleader and the pile driver or to plow. So now it's much harder to expert the Murktide. Yeah, I would just attack for 1 with the pile driver. So that sucks. Fourth land, attack for 5. So we should probably be thinking about Mystic Sanctuary as a possibility of the Scalding Tarn. Yep, there's Mystic Sanctuary. Throw the Murktide, attack for 6. Oh, Min did that slightly too wrong. He did it slightly did end of combat, not damage step. All right, so iteration. Iteration finds a DRC, which cannot be cast. So some awkward mana there. Pass. Oh, Sling Gang. That's interesting. So it's either you can do Sling Gang pass, or you could do War Chief Lackey. If there is no plow, then the Lackey gets to connect. Pretty unlikely. I think it's like pretty easy to read a second plow here, and I think the thing is though, if the War Chief gets plowed, the Lackey either is going to hold back the Murktide, or the Lackey is going to eat another removal spell. Oh, we know he has. Oh, right. We obviously right. Mystic Sanctuary. So we know the hand is Mystic Sanctuary, the plow from Mystic Sanctuary. Duh. And then 3 other cards. Yeah. So I don't even think that changes the line. I think it's Lucky Waste. Thanks for the follow. Nice name. So I will say I think Brian used the Wastelands aggressively a little bit too much, but I also told him to do that against Delver because that sort of is the game plan versus Delver, and this is sort of Delver-y, is what Min's playing. It's Delver-ish. You do want to Wasteland pretty aggressively against like iteration Murktide decks quite often. So, regardless of the known plow, the line is actually the same. Because the real prize is the Sling Gang. The Sling Gang is what we want to keep. Take another 6. But opponent not being on Bolt makes things a lot easier, honestly. The Murktide's a lot less threatening. So it's a 2-turn clock, and there's a Mentor plus a Bauble. So that's quite spooky. We can kill the Mentor, but then the token is here to trade with the Lackey, which is not a great trade. Gem Palm's a phenomenal draw. That is like such a good draw. Yeah, it's just so something that Brian says later at the end of the video is like, why not 4 experts? Why is it the expert 1 Jump Palm? And I think like, this is like a perfect example. It's like Jump Palm is easier on the mana, and drawing a card is sometimes better than a 1/1. And like double expert doesn't actually work here. I mean, you can technically make it work with a prospector, but then you're like costing yourself resources to do it. So yeah, Jump Pump's phenomenal here. So there's a tiny sequencing thing here that doesn't end up punishing him, but it easily could. You're supposed to Jump Palm first. So the reason you're supposed to Jump Palm first is we know that there's not really any realistic spell that men can put on the stack. It's not like he's playing Gut Shot. There's not really any spell they can put in response to Jump Palm. So Jump Palm is going to deal 2 damage to Mentor, and there's no way to trigger a Mentor. The problem with Expert is that you can Expert the Mentor. Men could like Force of Will or Daze. He obviously has Force in his deck. He might have Daze in his deck. But he could Daze here or Force and get a Mentor trigger and have a Monastery Mentor token. And that basically means the Lackey doesn't get to connect this turn. So you should Jump Palm first, deal 2 damage, definitely kill Mentor, and then Expert the Monk token. It's like a little counterintuitive, right, to use your quote-unquote bigger removal spell, which is Expert, on the smaller creature. But it's important that Jump Palm doesn't put a spell on the stack. Yeah, that's true. It's only if there was mana open, then you'd want to do it the other way. Burn yourself in Aether Vial, but this is fine. And even just like 1 life off of the Sling Gang is a huge deal because it turns the Murktide from a 2-turn clock to a 3-turn clock. And now Min's also facing lethal, because we have 6 power plus 6 drain for 6 and 1 goblin in hand. Ponder. Land. Ponder. Brainstorm. Predict. Basically, as soon as he casts the Predict, he's dead. It's just exactly, or yeah, 1 more than exactly lethal. So, pretty cool game. There's like a couple decision points that could have been made differently, but ends up working out. And like at the end of this game, Brian used like Min used all of his mana, but had like obviously a ton of land drops. And if we drew like one less land, this game could have potentially been harder because if you're not able to go Lackey Warchief on that one turn, the Lackey would not get to connect through the Mentor the previous turn, or the turn after rather.
Taste it out. Little aggro, little combo.
Yep.
Forget about
Goblin
Murktide Regent.
Goblin Tendrils.
Okay.
All right, so we saw DRC, we saw Murktide, and we saw Mentor. Those are the threats that are in Min's deck. We saw Iteration, kind of normal stuff. I think maybe the thing that caught Brian the most off guard is like how to bring in, or like when to bring in Pyrokinesis. I think he over sideboarded Pyrokinesis the most. And I don't think it's like horrible. Like I would leave the one Fury in my deck to cover Mentor plus DRC. But I wouldn't be boarding in Pyrokinesis in this matchup because, and I think I maybe misled him a little bit because I messaged him like against Delver, you cut, top end and all this. And he follows that advice for this.
All these red blasts are coming in.
Yep, red blasts.
Pyrokinesis deals 4 damage. That doesn't seem like enough. The Monastery Mentor is kind of a beating. Eli specifically told me Chalice is not for fair blue decks with lots of cantrips. You don't want to play Chalice on 1. What you want to do is bring that in as kind of a proactive Mindbreak trap against decks with Lion's Eye Diamond in them. It's basically always going to be on 0.
He boards out Ringleader a lot, actually.
Fringe matchups where you think about it a little bit more than that, but in general, it is not for these sorts of decks.
So Edict I'm kind of split on because it's good against Murktide. But I think the reality is against a control deck, I'm just less scared of Murktide than against Delver because the problem with Murktide against Delver is that it kills you in like sometimes like one hit, because if you take 8 and you've taken like any damage from a Delver or a DRC, then you just like become in bolt range because you can just get like Mystic Bolt. So Murktide without a supplementary clock, and Min does have DRC, so it's like still kind of scary, but I'm not sure it's scary enough that I would actually board in the 7 Edict here.
Okay, what is also not for these sorts of decks?
Wow.
They're not going to have artifacts. I don't know that I need Trash Master specifically as a way to make goblins bigger, because they're not going to have Plague Engineer either. Fury seems great against Monastery Mentor.
Yep. I'm thinking about against this type of deck that Min's playing, Fury, you could actually hardcast it. You could totally hardcast Fury in this matchup, like Cavern on Elemental, hardcast Fury in a long game.
Patron's good. Munitions Expert was pretty clutch there, but how much stock do I want to put on removing Mentor? Probably a lot.
Probably a lot, yep.
I guess lots of white removal and white blockers. Pile driver seems a little sus.
Yeah, so here I think Brian might misunderstand Pile Driver's role in the deck based on how he plays these games. Is that the thing with Pile Driver is like it's always going to die to white removal. It's always going to die to red removal, right? So why is it in the deck? So it's not that it's resilient to removal spells, and he talks about this a little bit, but I'm not sure he like gets all the way there. Is that like there's a lot of blue blockers, right? There's Murktide Regent, which can't be attacked through. And I would bet that part of it's influenced by the fact that he got blown out by the plow that one turn when he tried to punch through the Murktide. So it's like maybe that's not a good plan. But you just have to sequence it a little bit differently. You have to pace it differently. Maybe is the better way to say it. The role of Pile Driver is to tank removal spells for. It's like it deals so much damage early or threatens so much damage early in the game that it tanks removal spells for the larger, more impactful threats later on. And it's one of the only cards that deals as much damage as it does for the mana cost that it has. So it's one of the cheapest. It's the cheapest Goblins payoff card in terms of like actually winning the game. So Pile Driver, I think, is very good in this matchup because it demands answers, and you know, yeah, he's got white blockers. DRC has to attack. It's not really a blocker. Murktide can't block Pile Driver, and Mentor you have to kill on the spot. So it's not just like, and you have a ton of answers to Mentor. So I don't think you expect there to be a lot of monk tokens.
Patron seems important. Fable of the Mirror Breaker is a counterable card all the time.
So I get what he's saying about Fable. That is a downside.
Goblin tribal enchantment.
It is a downside to Fable, but Fable is so good in these like mid-range control matchups. It's just like sort of like a 3-for-1 at base if it resolves. It's just like so good. Because the 2/2 Treasure Maker is basically a card. Rummage 2 is basically a card. Iki is definitely a card and quickly becomes more than that.
I think I like the ringleader advantage.
Yeah.
Muxus seems like exactly where you want to take this game.
So we know. So I think you can kind of assume the way that Min has his deck built is there probably isn't any wastelands, which makes Ringleader and Muxus a lot better. Just because you can actually cast them, you're not going to get stuck up on lands.
Maybe this isn't a War Marshal matchup because I'm not really blocking at all.
So War Marshal, I don't think I would cut War Marshal versus any deck with Monastery Mentor because it gives you that insurance to make sure your experts and gem pawns always work.
Though that does do cool mana things with the Skark Prospector.
So he's thinking about the Prospector combo, which is reasonable.
This is what an
So I think actually overall is that Brian tends to board out Pile Driver too often and is reluctant to shave on the 1-drops more than he should. I could definitely see cutting Crater Maker. DRC is going to be a 3/3 vast majority of the time. It only kills Mentor, and you've got, your removal spells aren't targeting anything other than Mentor and DRC, right? For the most part. Pyroblast is for Murktide. I think I would just not board it. I think I would just board in 4 blasts. I'd keep in Pile Drivers, keep in Fable, keep in War Marshal. I'd cut Trash Master. I would shave like 1 Prospector, 1 Lackey, and a Crater Maker. That add up. We're only boarding in 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. And also, I could see an argument to board in Unlicensed Hearse for Murktide plus Mystic Sanctuary. I think that's like a reasonable thing to do.
Let's try it. Basically, the way I feel about this matchup, having played the other side much more often, is if they can't kill me, I'm gonna win. Which seems weird to take that.
I think
answer all their threats.
That normally is a pretty reasonable angle to take. I think that's going to be a little dicier against a more threat dense deck like Min's, like compared to a regular, like a classic Jeskai deck. So if he was playing a more traditional, like Planeswalker oriented Mentor deck, with Teferi's and Narsets and like 2 Mentors, like a Jace or something, then answering all their threats and just making sure you don't die is generally the strat. That's harder with Murktide just because it kills you so quickly, and it's harder to answer than Monastery Mentor is. Mentor is pretty fragile at the end of the day, so I want to keep more proactive cards.
Posture as the creature deck, but they have so few creatures, and I can nickel and dime for like 1 and 2 here and there. If they're not murking or mentoring, they're not really doing anything. There's no land or some mulligan, obviously. I can keep this one.
So this hand's like super sus, right? But I think it is a keep. You don't want to mulligan to 5. You just bottom a Ringleader.
I do love Ringleader, but I think 3 is too many. This hand's pretty cool because it can answer a threat. We did see a Dragon's Rage Channeler over there, so this is a lower to the ground kind of Jeskai thing. It's the Bauble predict DRC business all around. Gonna play this fetch land and pass. Holding on to Bauble. Someone's got to predict. Brainstorm. Bobble can also set up Terminus, which is really annoying. I'm not going to crack the fetch because I actually do want to draw lands. Don't want to thin them out.
Yep, good call.
Now that's awkward.
So here's this is like a classic conundrum really, is like, do you port with nothing on board? And sometimes it is correct, but I think Monk War Marshal was specifically the card that you generally want to play instead of porting on turn 2, just because it gets something on board for you. And also the way Min's mana is set up here, like if you're porting here, all you're really stopping is an iteration or a mentor. And if he plays a mentor, then you get to sudden edict it next turn, unless Min has a second bauble, which would suck. But so to win this game, you have to draw lands, right? To win this game, you have to draw lands. So if you assume there's a land on top of your deck, you're gonna want to go Monk War Marshal here, and then draw land, and then depending on what Min does, you can either Skirk plus Port, play Matron, or Sudden Edict Skirk. All those are reasonable choices, but you want to get something on board first, because if you play the War Marshal, a lot of your draws get better in that Expert and Gem Palm become functional cards. And the Skirk becomes useful sooner.
I'm going to use Rishadan Port this turn, and I'm going to get bad lands to do it. I don't really expect this opponent to mess with my mana too much.
Fetching bad lands is
so they're
good.
kind of a low to the ground version. There could be Wastelands in this deck. Just going to hope that there's not.
Yeah, you don't want the luxury of playing around Wasteland when on your 2-lander.
They draw the bauble card. Like if they draw Brainstorm or some good way to use that mana. I don't even know that would happen here. Like I would not Brainstorm in response to that. I'd take my draw step because I still have blue to cast it. I'm extremely interested in a land here. I have War Marshal plus Prospector, which is like Rite of Flame. I could get something good going. That Channeler kind of sucks.
Yeah, so Channeler, and then it whiffs on a land, which sucks. But now you're just like in this awkward spot where the War Marshal was down, feel a bit more live. So like here you just have to like, now you just play the War Marshal, you just did nothing with your last turn. Because you need the edicts to hit the follow-up threat. I don't think you can. You have to plan to kill DRC when your Goblin shape removal, and then use edict on the Murktide.
I think this thing is going to do me in eventually, but I got to get on board.
Yep.
I think I'm going to take the L on Sudden Edict and Dragon's Rage Channeler and just try to put War Marshal into play, get some material on the board. Channeler gets to connect here. Yeah, game 1 where I had Aether Vial and Cavern compared to this game where I just have 2 lands and no particular protection. Night and day. And this Channeler is insulating the Murktide in a way that's really annoying.
Yep.
It kind of looked like he was lining up a Prismatic Ending, then changed his mind because this War Marshal is just going to die anyway. Like he tapped 2 mana and then untapped it. Okay. Went for the ending all the same.
Yeah, so Men getting Delirium there is really good.
Got Redelirium immediately. Mission's Expert.
So, yeah. Now, I don't think it would matter because then the Prospector would just get pendinged. But if the War Marshal was in play, and then you played Skirk last turn, then you could, and if the Skirk had lived, you could expert the DRC, and then take a hit from Murktide, then edict it.
Pain in my ass. Okay. What can I even do here? I could play Matron if I sack my... Like if I go...
Yeah, so you can go for some Matron line. There's nothing to Matron for here.
Goblin.
Let's fast forward a little bit. So you just edicts. So that point is just like, I hope I draw Pyroblast. And there's another DRC and you're sad. Yeah, you're just one, like, right? You're just like one short. Like if there's one more Goblin in play here, then the Expert could kill this DRC, and then you still got another turn to draw Pyroblast. Alright, so that was game 2. Bit awkward just because of the mulligan, like 2-lander took too long to draw your 3rd land, and that is like a lot of Goblins losses, where it's like you just take the risk on the 2-lander and you don't find it.
like taking Murktide out of the equation and making DRC suck are both of interest to me.
I think if you
I'm
board
not gonna.
in Leyline in this matchup, you just get to die to Monastery Mentor. It's like the real thing is, and the games are gonna go long. There's a lot of interaction, so like just can't really afford to be drawing Leyline on like turn 6. So here I think he's thinking like a Delver deck, and then he starts cutting on these cards, which I totally get the impulse of, but I think especially when you're on the play, you can absolutely keep them. And like I think he shaved War Marshal, and War Marshal is one of your better cards in the matchup, right? Is like in that game 2, if that War Marshal was down on turn 2, if you had a second one, then the expert can kill the DRC like for sure. So like you do want to drop multiple War Marshals, especially against like decks that, Mint deck probably has Pyroclasm or Kozilek's Return. And War Marshal's a pretty good way to either bait those out early or insulate from them, because you're getting multiple bodies on board without actually costing yourself multiple cards. Force the Fable back in. I like it.
In game 1, and
First, reasonable.
I haven't seen a basic land yet, but I imagine this deck can just lightning bolt a Magus of the Moon.
I think once you see Plow and Pending, there's a pretty decent shot there is no Bolt. So Magus is not insane to board in here, to be honest. Like I didn't really think about it, but Min's deck might be somewhat cold to Magus. Oh, except for I guess Pyroclasm would always get you. So it's not really going to be a hard lock, but it will shut off the cantrips, shut off Murktide, shut off DRC, or shut off Mentor. So it's just going to be like DRC and hoping to draw the Pyroclasm. Yeah. War Marshal comes back in. So I think he's identifying the correct cards to get back in the deck, except for Pile Driver. But I understand why you wouldn't like the Pile Driver. He just board the Magus, okay, but he's just cutting the wrong cards. He's cutting the cheaper cards are usually okay to shave on. You don't want to, like, there's definitely a spot in this game where he would want to Matron for Ringleader, but doesn't have a Ringleader in his deck. This hand's great. You would want a removal spell, but this hand's pretty good. Like, if the Skirk was a Musician's Expert, it would be better. Port's nice. So this is how, Port gets to be a 2-drop when you're on the play, and you have 2 3s that you want to play, but you just don't have any, like, you don't have an mana. This is the most mana efficient play, right? Is Port. Skirk is not mana efficient. You're spending, effectively, you're spending 2 mana for a one mana spell. Say
a War Chief, a red mana Ponder. You got it. I think I'm gonna War Chief and crunch this turn, or I could Matron. Ooh. I'd also just get in the car. I could also Skirk Prospector and Rashad Port. That doesn't seem like the worst thing that's ever happened. I think I want to get my car online.
So the problem with this is you get really vulnerable to a Mentor this way. I think I'd be jamming War Chief on this turn, because that Min has to use a removal spell before you untap, basically. So it's kind of like a tax on the next turn. Get in for 2 no matter what, and if he doesn't kill it, then you have double Cavern, Matron, Skirk with a War Chief in play, which gives you like so many options. So I think I would sign War Chief here, because then if there's a Mentor, you can go Matron for Expert or Matron for Jump Palm, kill Mentor.
Are there Force of Wills left in your deck? Doesn't seem like it. I'm gonna exile these spells immediately before they can be used for anything. And I'm gonna play this Uncounterable Prospector. I like any sequence that lets me tap all my mana in the turn. Big fan of everything that just happened. Control the Murktides, control the DRCs. Ponder, yeah, that might put 2 more things in my car. Did not shuffle. Found a Flooded Strand. Ooh, Pyroblast, what's up?
Pyroblast is nice.
Cavern of Souls, get in there. Name Goblin. I exile this graveyard immediately.
I don't think you need to do that immediately. because, well, sorceries are probably actually the sorcering creature is probably the hardest. You might want to eat Bauble. Since you drew the Pyroblast and the first didn't get forced, I think there's a reasonable read that there's no forcible in Min's hand. So can have a decent shot of the Pyroblast resolving. So kind of like not using the hearse quite yet.
I want to give him nothing.
No, this is a tough call, right? The War Chief in play would make things easier. So like, how much do we want to play control here? Can't really. You're too exposed to Matron for. You could if he tapped a little differently, he could have Cavern up, sack Matron to Skirk, get an expert the DRC, but that's like kind of spewing. But here's where you would want a Ringleader in your deck. I think Ringleader is probably what you want to get here. Ends up going for Sling Gang, I believe, which is like reasonable, but again, you're leaving yourself without Mentor answer, which is scary. And also, the other reason to not use the hearse yet when you have the Pyroblast, so you're not necessarily scared of Murktide, is Min might attack and might accidentally get Delirium, because if there's a creature sorcery, just like if he wants to cantrip and he fetches, like he just like has Delirium, then you could just like take away Delirium mid combat and block. Predict. Go to Force. Ponder. Hydroblast. Skirk. And then Ball. Nice, got Delirium. Just put that entire pile and put 9 cards as graveyard in one turn. That's kind of obscene. Double port's interesting. Yeah, DRC plus Bobble supercharges the graveyard in a pretty ridiculous way, along with fetches, of course. Makes you like Hearse less. You just have to use it differently. Like Hearse is still good. It's just you just have to use it differently. I think it just boils down to that. I want to get this War Chief before exposing the Sling Gang here. I mean, it is also a 4/4 thing, so I don't hate just going War Chief, attack for 3, spend one more turn eating the graveyard. And then you also get to probably port Volk here. Because if you port Tundra, then the War Chief's probably just going to get plowed in upkeep. You don't want them to use their mana. This is fine too, though. It's like if you just like you just don't use Hearse and then you can block. So Pyroclasm, it's fine. Like so here's Hearse being good, right? Is you can you basically turn the Pyroclasm. This is a 2/2 Pyroclasm, and you gain like 6 or 4. Gain 4, yeah. Take the Bauble and probably Pyroclasm, so it can't get Mystic Sanctuaried. I've got a 6/6 Hearse. Died. It plays around Daze here, which is understandable. I don't think Daze is in Min's deck, but it's reasonable to play around here. A second Sling Gang is quite good. 6. I was like, you can plow the Sling Gang, but then you just crew back for 6, and that'd be lethal because you drain 1 off the Sling Gang. Doesn't expose. Yeah, I like that. You know, you're in a really good position now, so you can just take it a bit slow, and then the War Chief has to get plowed. Yep. Nice iteration. Not enough. The Pyroblast sits. Yeah, those pretty well played towards the end. All right, so that's round 1. I'm gonna go a little bit faster. I don't have that much time to stream today, so. All right, Sneep. Yeah, and this is a tough call, right? Of Lackey or Vile, right? I think this one's this is a little dicier because you don't have a removal spell, so blocker kind of is really sad. But you've got you have perfect mana, so you have 4 cards to punish a blocker, which is 3 expert, 1 jump home. And the fact that it's Cavern, like, and normally I think the tier list is like on the play, Cavern Lackey is better than Mountain Vile, but Mountain Vile is better than Mountain Lackey. And also this hand doesn't really have a Vile curve, right? It's not just like 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like a very lopsided. Like we got a 1, or we got a 1, a 6, and a 2. So Vile doesn't jive with this hand super well. So I think you, and also there's the possibility that your opponent's on the combo deck, and you just want to start on Lackey in that case. So I agree with Cavern Lackey here. Get Fatal Push. Wasteland, Vile, excellent. Thoughtseize is sad. Takes the Mogwai Marshal. Shuffle Strix. Here. Thoughtseize takes Ringleader. That's a bummer. Go another land. Strix. So this is Grixis control. Another Ringleader. Alright. File on the Ringleader. Let's see what we get. Ringleader. Yep. Alright, so that's the last Ringleader. And this one bricks. It's just straight up whiff. That's so bad. That's like extremely unlikely, honestly. He's drawn 6 lands, then bottomed 3 non-goblins, then bottomed 4 non-goblins. Like, that's super unlucky. But now the top of his deck's pretty live. I don't know if I like this attack. Generally don't like trading Ringleader with Baleful Strix. Prefer to trade the X1s. It's like kind of fine. But generally, you know, when you're trading into a Baleful Strix, you want to get something out of it, whether that's you know, a pile driver trigger or, you know, some other benefit, Sling Gang, Patch Like Mons, something like that. And since you know, you've got this Muxus, so right, well, that's the Thoughtseize, but opponent's down to 10. Opponent's dealt a lot of damage themselves. Pile drivers not bad here. Then you don't attack, right? So now, so here's the thing: is like if you had two Ringleaders here, the Baleful Strix in play, but the Baleful Strix doesn't really matter. You could potentially be getting 5 damage instead of 3 off the pile driver. Edict. But Edict's kind of another reason to not trade too much. Fable's great draw. Matron's awesome. Yeah. Sling Gang. I saw somebody in the comments say something about Matron for Muxus here, but then you just lose to discard spell. Rashad and Pizza, thanks for the follow. Banger usernames today. Yeah, Sling Gang's really good. Would I've been taking Vile up? No, I leave it at, you only have 1 Muxus in the deck. I'll just leave it at, and if you draw a land, you have 6 mana sources, so I would just, yeah, So I wouldn't trade the token there because that's Baleful Strix just doesn't matter. You just only want to trade one once with Baleful Strixes. And I also don't want to expose this matron to an edict. Like edict in response to Violent 4. Because of the Kiki token. And opponent concedes because they are imminently dead. Their hands presumably counter spells and discard spells. So Grixis control. Fire Blast is generally the best card, and I think he pours in Pyrokinesis here out of fear of Engineer. But I think the thing. Let's see what it says.
Strix is one of the expressed intentional targets of that card in the deck. Fable was pretty good. Pile Driver is very good. They have a lot of removal. Crater Maker can kill a Strix. War Marshal can push through a Strix. Munition Expert kill Strix.
So I think he's focused on Strix, and Strix I think is like one of the least relevant cards in the matchup.
Something like Skirk Prospector probably won't have a lot of material to feed.
Yep, I think that's a reasonable.
Plague Engineer now is
generally one
you just max out on
one prospector in the deck.
You expect Plague Engineer. Is that what Sudden Edict is for? Yeah, Sudden Edict seems really bad against the Baleful Strix deck.
Yep.
Probably want some large number of Kinesis.
Yeah, so I do not want Kinesis against Grixis control. Fury's fine because it'll kill Planeswalkers, and Hardcast 3/3 Double Strike is good. But the card disadvantage, the thing is like if someone plays a Plague Engineer, you're going to lose some amount of your board, maybe all of it. And then if you're doing a 2-for-1 to kill the Engineer, you're 2-for-1ing yourself, killing the Engineer after the Engineer's already killed something. You're just turning it into an even better value trade for your opponent. And granted, this list isn't super hedged towards Engineer because not many decks play Engineer right now. So that's just sort of a bad trade. 1 second, someone is at my door. All right. So yeah, Kinesis is not really a good answer to Engineer unless Kinesis is already good in the matchup. So like against a Lurin, Kinesis is phenomenal, regardless of Engineer, and it gets better because it clears Engineer. So the real way to deal with Engineer from a control deck is you're hedging by cutting X1s, and you're saving specific cards for specific purposes.
Ringleader seems great. I'm bringing in a lot of non-goblins though, but like also, yeah, that's tough to balance. Bringing in this many non-goblins. Maybe I'm not bringing in this many non-goblins though. Like we saw Snapcaster Mage and Baleful Strix as blue cards that I don't really want to tangle with, but there's no like Murktide Regent in this deck that is.
So I think I'd put in 3 Pyroblast here. You probably want to see 1 a game. Probably don't need to see 2, but you wouldn't be unhappy to see 2. But you probably don't want to see 3 because all their blue cards, all the relevant blue cards are going to be 2-for-1s, right? There's going to be Snap, there's going to be Strix. There might be a Jace, there might be Narset. So their value cards are blue for the most part. So you do want. I also might have stuff like Hydroblast or like Dress Down, which are also reasons to have Reb. So I think I'd do 3 Rebs here, and I would skip the Kinesis. And I think that's it. I think I would only sideboard 3 Rebs. And shave 1 Prospector, 1 Lackey. Probably just, 1 Prospector, 2 Lackeys, or 2 Prospector, 1 Lackey.
Just gonna kill me on its own. I'm much more worried about the black cards. I like all the tutor stuff. Opposition Agent is pretty funny, but I don't think that's what this is for. And I'm not going to get too cute. Pile Driver, it just seems great. I think Fable.
Fable's one of the best cards in the matchup. It's so good. Like, anyone's trying to Thoughtseize you to death, and you just like have a thing on board that creates multiple bodies, and the Kiki value is like unbeatable once you get it going.
And is it a Muxus?
And
you know,
Muxus is here for
now than I did last round.
For this matchup, right?
Ringleader value chains seem important to catch up here.
I think maybe a general heuristic would be if Ringleader matters, then Muxus matters. There's basically no matchups anymore where Ringleader is good but Muxus is bad, now that Ringleader isn't the plan against Delver. It used to be the case that you would cut Ringleader but leave Muxus, but for the most part they go hand in hand now. Except, you sometimes... Well, no, that's not... if Ringleader is good, then Muxus stays in almost always. You do cut Ringleader and leave in Muxus, because that's like all combo matchups. Yeah, it goes one way but not the other. Ringleader and Muxus stay together if Ringleader's good. If Muxus is good, that doesn't necessarily mean that Ringleader is good. This hand's huge trap. Can't keep one land while hands on the draw against a deck that has Thoughtseize and probably like Kolaghan's Command or Hidetsugu consumes all. And yeah, you get Thoughtseized and you're really sad. I get why. Like, this hand's like a lot of good cards, so if you just draw super well, it's okay. But the fact that, it's a wasteland, right? And it's you've got the expert already. So like if it was a red source, then it's like a little more, but it's just like you have to draw 2 lands to make this hand functional. Green 3 1 Skirk 2 War Marshal. No, I like War Marshal because War Marshal's bad against Engineer specifically, but is good against like every other card in their deck. You're happy to trade War Marshal tokens with Strix, with Snapcaster, Crushers Planeswalkers at very low cost. Just good against, a bunch of spot removal type stuff. It's only specifically Engineer, so I would just shave the Lackey, like 1 Lackey, 1 Skirk. I forget the last card I said. Or it was like 2 Lackey, 1 Skirk, or 2 Skirk, 1 Lackey. I'm not sure which. Yeah, good. Yeah, Skirk or War Marshal is good against K Command. Yeah, if you miss your land drop on turn 2, just not like Cavern's a decent draw, but there's like a 5,000% chance you get Plague Engineer on this next turn. Like, it's just like absolutely going to happen. So that's why. So that's the thing is, we know that Engineer is going to happen. It's just like sort of inevitable. I would just not play this Crater Maker. I'd play the Pile Driver. We have the Fury, but I'd prefer not to Fury a lone Engineer. You really would want to Crater Maker the Engineer, and then like ideally hardcast Fury later on in the game and kill like a Strix and an Engineer the second, because there's going to be 2 Engineers. So in a way, okay, given that opponent Thoughtseize is here. The Crater Maker could get Thoughtseize if there's an Engineer coming, but I think I'd still be happier playing the Pile Driver. The opponent also has Fatal Push, so but you'd rather have the Pile Driver tank the Fatal Push than the Crater Maker. 6 Gem Palm. Bolt. Angler's interesting. So, has 5 cards. Don't draw, land draw. Useless Trash Master. Yeah, I think you could convince me to like attack for 2 Fury post combat and just accept getting Force of Will. So honestly, I'd be a little bit surprised if Force of Will is in the opponent's deck. This board. Right. So here's the thing: it's like Pyrokinesis. Yeah, like you can eat your entire hand to. What does that Force of Will? That's weird to me, honestly. You do this, deck for 1, get Edicted, snap, expressive iterations. But it's turn 8 and you have 3 lands in play and 1 red source. Like, there's no, like, of course you lost this game, right? That's just you have to be able to develop. And Brian's hand just could not develop after the Vial gets Thoughtseize. So interestingly, if the Vial did not get Thoughtseize, opponent at least didn't choose to draw any shatter effects, so the Vial like probably would have go the distance, but that's kind of neither here nor there. They kept Thoughtseize for a reason. And also the life loss on Thoughtseize is like a reason to emphasize pivoting into a bit more of an aggressive stance against control, against Grixis control, because it's just like, yeah, they can take your best card, but if you're beating them down, it can become like quite prohibitive to cast Thoughtseize multiple times a game, and you want to make sure that that's like a real punish. So first comes in like sort of okay versus, it's like kind of okay versus Angler, just based on the fact that it gets bigger than Angler very quickly. It kind of turns that into a non-problem. But I don't hate Hearthstone, also good Snapcaster. Probably not cut. Yeah, I just like these Pyrokinesis are really bad in my opinion. And then, you know, you just don't have Fable and Muxus in your deck, which are some of the best cards. Sand's pretty solid. Like it. Fatal Push. Pile Driver. So here's maybe a small thing. Well, we haven't seen Hymn to Turok yet, and the pun's playing Iteration, so probably not also playing Hymn to Turok. I kind of want to play Port here, because if you draw a Wasteland, you want like both your mana denial in play. Probably wouldn't matter specifically with this hand, so it's probably whatever. Okay, Thoughtseize again. Matron. Double Pile Driver. Snap. Push. That Pirate Blast is like exactly one turn too late, which sucks. Angler. Yeah, he goes Red Blasts on exactly like the wrong turns, and then doesn't draw another spell. Yeah, that's pretty unlucky. Like your Matron got Thoughtseize at the perfect time. Draw a Red Blast the turn after Snapcaster resolves. Then draw a second Red Blast and targets after getting hit with an Angler. Like, you just needed one card advantage tool to stabilize that game, I think. Alright. Play, hand's good. So since you got the Port here, I mean, he only boarded in 2 rebs. He boarded in 2 rebs and he drew both of them. And they would have been good. Just the second one was not great. But the first one would have been insanely good if it hit the Snapcaster with the on the previous turn before it resolved, right? Like I don't think that wasn't really an overboarding problem. That's just like drawing your cards in the wrong order. So fetching Badlands there is like kind of suicidal against Force plus Wasteland. So I think you're basically always supposed to fetch Mountain first, especially if you don't have any other red sources. And I think the question of like Lackey or Vial here is interesting. The Vial goes well with the Port, so I lean towards Vial. Even though this hand doesn't really have a Vial curve, but it kind of creates its own Vial curve with like turn 1 Vial, turn 2 Port, Vial and Lackey, connect, put in Ringleader, Trashmaster. So I think it's fine. I think boarding in 0 rebs against Grixis is like absolutely wrong. Just like, no way, that's correct. Your opponent's playing Iteration and Snapcaster Mage and Baleful Strix. Like, all their 2-for-1s are blue. Dredge. This match is funny. Port. Yeah. Fun it. Yep. Not much to say about that game. Yeah, Angler is kind of hilarious to play compared to Murktide. Okay, so Dredge. So I think the thing that he misses, that Pyrokinesis is insane in this matchup, but it's kind of weird because it's only going to be insane this matchup because of the way Goblins is and its effectiveness against Bridge from Below. So let's see what.
But I don't really think that's how we're going to win this game. Fury can put it unlicensed hearse coming in. Don't expect any searching, pyrokinesis, whatever. Red blast. They might have some breakthroughs and stuff. But
So yeah, I think you could board in like 1 or 2 rebs against this version of Dredge because they tend to play more blue draw spells, which means it's breakthrough, otherworldly gaze, and cunning or careful study. There's no LEDs, so if you do blast the looting spells, then they could struggle to get something into the graveyard Dredge in the first place. So obviously boarding in 4 Graveyard Hate. I also think Chalice on 1 is pretty good against this version of Dredge. And it also stops the Coval therapies from eating your hand. It stops your 1 surgical extraction, which is like not that big a deal.
But I don't really think that's how we're going to win this game. Fury can put itself in the graveyard if you evoke it. Sling Gang.
So he's got the red idea with the Fury, but the thing is, like, Pyrokinesis does the same thing, but better, because you can blow up Icarids in the upkeep, or Narcomoebas as they flip in the upkeep, or in the draw step. And then you have multiple ways to pop Bridge at instant speed, so Kinesis is very good.
Blowing up their bridges is a big part of this matchup. This could be a Lion's Eye Diamond deck as well, depending on their build.
Yeah, I think Brian's just not as
and bring in the Chalice.
Sure on current Dredge technology. I think, if you're playing a standard LED Dredge, I do board in 1 Chalice on the play, not on the draw though.
Trash Master, you actually do need a target to activate this. You can't just chuck your goblins in the graveyard. Prospector is great at nuking bridges. Where are
He's got that part, and I know.
A Muxus.
Yeah, the Muxus is not what you want to cut. I think.
We're not really grinding here on Ringleader.
That's good.
I like 1 Muxus for the Lackey high roll possibility, and now that I know, like, if I had let on Lackey, we might have been competitive that game. Raider Maker can put itself in the graveyard. Pile Driver can punch through Narcomoebas, but not through zombies. But my plan is to remove the zombies. Fable seems really slow and bad here.
Yep, you can probably cut Fable here.
This is what I'm doing.
I think the thing against Dredge is that because of the discard spells, you can end up low on gas sometimes. So I think what you want to do is actually trim on vials. Depending on how many cards you board, then you cut all the vials. Against Cabal Therapy decks, especially ones where you want to sideboard a lot of cards, Vial can really have severe diminishing returns, up to the point you might not want any in your deck at all.
I guess.
Because especially when you're having to use your sack outlets kind of liberally and can't pick your spot quite as much because it's just like, oh, there's a bridge trigger, I have to kill the thing. You can end up short on resources, so Vial wants high resources in your hand, right? So that's like another reason to shave on Vial.
Let's try it.
Yeah, I think I would have, Pyrokinesis in for sure. Chalice, I think, is fine. So let's say that's 7 cards. You cut like 3 to 4 Vials, 3 Ringleaders. Jump Home's like too slow and doesn't trigger Bridge. So I'd probably cut that.
On the play, nothing that does anything. I'm gonna mulligan this.
Yep, good call.
Okay, this hand's actually
Sand slaps.
Looks pretty hard. I'm gonna keep it and bottom the basic mountain.
So I think you bottom the Vial here. So you're just like definitely leading on one of these, and you want the 3rd land so that you can cast a Matron on turn 3, or like Pashlik Mons without having to draw land first.
I get to put Leyline in and play Lackey. I'm a little worried about Force of Vigor if I lead on Aether Vial. But like Vial is better for this plan. I could also just jam Prospector in. All right, I'm gonna play Vial. If you have Force of Vigor green card, congratulations.
Yeah.
This 2-lander, I'm gonna eventually need to win the game somehow. All right, we're just chucking cards into exile here. Desperately digging for outs to Leyline.
Yep. was like ends up kind of okay here, but yep. I like that he doesn't put the pile driver in. Hide info, otherworldly gaze. Leyline being leyline. And this is just like it's like a hard lock right there, actually. Opponent just like literally can't make progress through a Pasha like Skirk with that much mana open. Are there any other matchups that cut Vile? Yeah, some basically combo decks where you have to side in a lot of cards is where you cut Vile. Karn decks, decks that play Chalice and Karn and leave in the Chalices, I'll cut the Vials. Decks that play like multiple, and it have to be a lot of them, but like Pernicious Deed, Hidetsugu consumes all, Meltdown. Then you can shave a lot. You don't want to cut all of them because it's usually good in the matchup, but you want to avoid getting 2-for-1'd by those more narrow effects. So you don't want to draw multiples. So you can shave like 3 vials. I think he brings Noxus back in, which I like, and shaves a vial. Yeah, so this is really nice, right? Like Brian's picking it up as it goes, and I think that's like a good instinct, right? Is that he kind of saw the vial. The game's become low resource, and the vial doesn't do as much. And he brings in Muxus because you need to kill them. Yeah, this hand's a good fair hand. It's not a fair matchup. A hearse. You have 2 ley lines and a surgical. The lack of pyrokinesis in the deck makes things a little dicier. It's harder to mulligan. If you're mulling to a 2 of leyline, it's difficult to like realistically do that. Dredge games can drag out, but if you don't have interaction for like the first thing, then yeah, you'll die. Potential for Lackey Muxus. I think this 7 I would absolutely keep on the play against Dredge. I think you, especially this version of Dredge, I'm pretty confident that this version of Dredge cannot like get creatures into play on turn 1. But yeah, I think if you keep this on the draw, it's just really likely they flip an Archimedes or flip an Archimedes and trigger, and maybe trigger bridge. If this hand had a removal spell, I might be interested. We also know that I know opponents' deck plays Grief. And this hand's great against Grief on the play, right? It's like they take your Muxus and then you still have Slinging the Pile Driver, which is a turn 3 kill. That also has instant speed bridge removal. Like that's like a really good curve through a Grief. So this hand's like Snapkeep on the play. On the draw, it's just like too easy to fall apart. It's close. Hand's not good. Goes to 4. So let's see what he puts back on the 4. I guess it's pretty straightforward. Just put back Muxus, land. There's Grief, Surgical, Study, Pile Driver. It's doing stuff. Wasteland. Have no cards in hand. They have Imp and Thug. I think I would wasteland this Cephalid Coliseum. You have to fade a Dredge. But if they don't hit something really good on that Dredge 5, then you... Like the Coliseum's really scary. But I understand wanting, Expert here is decent. You get to make sure there's no bridges that go off this turn. Yeah, so did whiff, and I don't know why opponent doesn't activate Cephalid here. You could spew through so many cards. So now you just kind of had a Now there's Cephalid. There's a bridge. No Narcomoebas. The Narcomoebas are really hiding. Yeah, you're just getting forced to play like really reactively, which is like not really where you want to be. So yeah, I think if there's 3 bridges. So I think if last turn there was Wasteland, opponent doesn't get to Coliseum. How many cards do they dredge in Coliseum? So they hit 1 bridge and an Icarid. So this would happen this turn. So I don't think they would have seen. They'd be, 1 dredge's worth of cards less deep in their deck. So these bridges wouldn't be there yet. Maybe the first bridge was there. So if you had Wastelanded and then play Pile Driver, maybe you might still hold up Expert. Holding up Expert's still like reasonable. Yeah. Brian smartly Expert kill itself. Top 3 bridges. Coval Therapy names. Goblin Matron. Cool. So you're probably not supposed to name Matron with the therapy in the art because you can always just Matron or therapy what the Matron goes for. So I think probably when I name something more immediately, probably named like Pashlik Mons. It's like naming a 1-of is kind of dicey. Creator Maker's not a bad draw. There's only 1 bridge left in the deck. So when you get to this point in the game, you want to draw like cards that delay the ground, like Mogwai Marshal, Sling Gang. Draw on a mana for Sling Gang, but you draw a 3rd land, then you don't really need to draw a 4th land. Prospector's still okay for the 4th bridge. And you're only really scared of Hogak. Hogak's like the scariest card in Dredge. There's Pashlik Mons. Okay. There's Narco. Takes that. There's the Fury. This game would actually be like super. This game would be a lot. That's at 7. There's a chance that this Fury, if Brian had been playing more proactively, there would be a zombie in play, but the Fury might actually suddenly end the game if you've been playing your spells instead of holding up stuff. But I'm not sure if that's like actually the correct line in the moment. 2 Icarids. Yeah, opponent kind of punts here. Opponent should just immediately go Hogak, just like right now. So lets it go. And then the hearse. Yeah, this is sick. This is really sick. Fury 4 Narcomoebas. So here's the sort of instance of Pyrokinesis being better than Fury in this matchup. Is that you can upkeep Pyro, Icarid, Narcomoeba. So if he hadn't drawn the hearse, Icarid, Narcomoeba, and then but it's like actually out of ways to bring back the Narcs. And doing in the upkeep keeps them from getting Gak in play. So Kinesis is like really good for stopping Hogak, which is actually the key card of the matchup on the opponent's side. But regardless, that is a sick as hell Fury. Opponent's got 2 cards left. Otherworldly Gaze, 5 cards left in the library. Eat 2 Narcos. And opponent would need to. Opponent has an Imp. Can't dredge 6. Opponent's like not really allowed to dredge anymore. So if opponent drew. Okay, so opponent needs to like bring back Narcomoeba. You can't dredge the Thug without dying though. Actually, not sure what you're supposed to do. Cast Stinkweed Imp. Eat that. That's dead before. Yeah, that's a sweet game. That was a really sweet game. Mulligan to 4. Survive with this skin in your teeth. The expert killing 3 bridges was super, super clutch. I wonder, did opponent board out the 4th bridge? Kind of funny if that's, maybe they, quite sure. All right. Round 4 here. This hand's like okay. The vial gets dealt with, your mana's kind of shaky, but if the vial sticks, then you can do some like pretty obscene things in like turn 4 or 5, just because you're gonna have such a ridiculous mana advantage. Yeah, opponent definitely could have won playing Hogak. Let me double check Brian's life total real quick. The turn the hearse comes down. Okay, you're at 6, so you have to eat 2 Narcomoebas. Or, yeah, 2 Icarids, rather. So he's not allowed to eat Hogak Icarid and just take an Icarid hit. Oh, here's your Reanimator, yeah. We sideboard. We talked about we talked about sideboarding first dredge a good bit. I'll check the VOD for that if you want. Already talked about it. Stinky Demon had good old stinky beats. Yeah, Brian quickly learns that Reanimator sucks. This matchup, so bad. Matron and get nothing and die. Sarah's Emissary, you're dead. Yep. All right. Yep. Throw the kitchen sink at them. Yep. All those cards come in. I even sometimes sideboard in like 1 or 2 blasts to counter show and tells, because they pivot into that, which is really annoying. Oh, it's like wrong. My last Reanimate opponent cast show and tell, and I had Muxus in my hand. Like, you did this to yourself.
Deck. I imagine if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound here with the chalice. Just do anything that you can to slow them down.
Mm-hmm.
Incinerator and Munitions Expert do not seem like the plays here.
Yeah. So here's the funny thing about the Goblin removal in this matchup is like, so if you assume in any game that you're winning, you've hated on the graveyard to some capacity, right? So we just assume that's happening, because otherwise you're dead. So what happens after that? A lot of the time, it comes down to them like discarding your goblins and then trying to reanimate them to stabilize for long enough until they can reanimate another big thing, or like find an answer to your ley line. And this creates a weird dynamic where Expert is like bad because it gives them a removal spell. But Jump Hum doesn't work that way because it only works from hand, not come to play. And Jump Hum will always kill whatever goblin they reanimate, basically. Because of the all goblins clause. I do leave 1 expert in the deck because, it'll still, sometimes you just cast it to pump your pile driver or whatever. And on Muxus flips, like if your opponent animates an Arcana Cruelty or like a Chancellor, and you get a Muxus into play, then like off of Lackey, then you want to have 1 expert in your deck. Well, it'd be nice to flip the expert off of the Muxus instead of Jump Hum, but sometimes you're a little short to actually like jump humming an Archon is hard. Experting is a bit easier. So I like leaving in 1 expert and then leaving 1 Jump Hum. So you got 2. So you cut 2 experts. And cut the Fury, cut the Ringleader, cut the Fable, Shave on Vial. Yep. I usually go to 2 vials. And so I'm cutting two experts here and probably cutting 2 more vials. And then leave the Jump Hum in. Yeah, this hand too slow. If you had any graveyard hate, I'd probably keep this, but
come on now.
I don't see the ley line. There's the ley line, but it's like kind of bad. Yep, I would do the same. Let's get Wear Terror or whatever. So drew 1 turn too late, so it's turn 4 Matron. What you get from Matron here is kind of interesting. I would probably It's like War Chief's okay, because then you can like curve out attacking pretty well, because then you can go War Chief attack for 3, Trash Master attack for 8. Sling Gang's also quite reasonable. Sling Gang is a little bit worse against like Thoughtseize Reanimate. That gives them a lot of time, but you've got Pashlik and Trash Master to beat the 1/1s. So yeah, I kind of like Sling Gang here, especially if your opponent casts Show and Tell. Sling Gang's probably the better one. It's War Chief, which I think is also fine. And War Chief's is really good if you draw like a lackey. I guess he didn't have 4 lands, so it's kind of whatever. If you had Sling here, you play Sling Gang, attack for 1, opponent's down to 15. Rip Aparts, okay. Tomb, Reanimate Dead. So if there's a Sling Gang in play, maybe this game is winnable. 80. Strong, maybe. Probably not. Yeah, the lackey shows up the turn late. The lackey would have been good. Pashlik triggers are just not quite enough through the life gain. It's like actually closer than it looked, and I think if you do have a Sling Gang, it's possibly within reach. But Reanimator, as Brian does say, is one of the absolute worst matchups. And this is a quick round 5, I think. Yep, reasonable keep. So yeah, I don't like this. I don't like this wasteland. You're like your hand is literally 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't know what your opponent's playing. Like Underground Sea Pass usually says combo. You just don't know. So I would Mountain Skirk. I would assume that they're not playing Counter Magic. If they do play Counter Magic, I'm happy they're dazing my Prospector and I have a Wasteland. So I'm kind of like ahead 2 mana, sort of a way. Brainstorm. There's Prop. I drew another land, so it kind of works out. So Brainstorm, Wasteland. Opponent. So it seems though the Wasteland does actually. I guess they had 2 Brainstorms. I need Wasteland him again. Aha. Oh, they do the land. Okay. We're in this weird. Oh yeah, and he caverned the Skirk, right? And you got to think about it's like, do I care? It's like, yeah, this card can be uncounterable. Do I care if like the only matchup where it could matter that your Skirk gets countered is Doomsday, and I think I've seen Trop by then, right? Yeah, once you see Trop, you know that it's not Doomsday. So there's no reason to expose the Cavern. Because it's not just that it's uncounterable, it's that it's your black source. So it makes your black cards uncastable if you draw them. So like, even given the option of uncounterable Skirk or a dazed Skirk, I would take dazed Skirk. This could be like Bug Delver at this point. Oh, it just hits all the land drops. Now we're in this awkward spot, right? Opponent Assassin's Trophy is the Skirk Prospector, which is the best thing that he could have asked for, honestly. You draw the land, so good. War Chief, Trader Maker, I like it. I like getting the War Chief in there when you can double spell. Punishing Fire, spooky, but Pile Driver, kind of interesting. Actually quite interesting. I kind of like. I think to make Pile Driver effective, you want to line it up with your haste stuff. So at this point, it's Strike Pile, right? We've seen Trophy and P-Fire out of a 4-color control deck that's like very Strike Pile. I kind of like Pile Driver Port because you can port the Badlands before a Grove is in play. So that would mean that if opponent goes Grove, they can regrow the Punishing Fire, but they can't cast it. And then you can go Ringleader, and that's a swing for 9. And then they're just like dead regardless of P-Fire, and you can follow that up with a Lord. So I think I would pile to report this turn to set up the tempo swing, and this kind of sucks. Drown block. That's rough. That wasn't like a specific thing on my mind, but all right, so there's the Grove. So if you'd poured the Badlands, then the Grove comes in, like, doesn't quite matter yet. P-Fire, sure. I just really wanted this. I really want this pile driver in play is the thing. But now it's kind of awkward and mana inefficient. Like, otherwise, you kind of want to go Pashlik plus Lackey here, because you kind of have to kill both those things. And if you kill the Lackey, you kind of have to kill the Lackey, so then you get 1 damage out of the Lackey dying. Yeah, I mean, I just think the texture of the game is such that the pile driver gets the tempo. I'm gonna use Bayou to buy back Grove for. So Punishing Fire needs to be like tap Badlands. There's no Grove in play. Punishing Fire's in the graveyard. They play Grove, the Burn Willows, tap Grove, bring back P-Fire, and then you can't cast the P-Fire. It's just in their hand. Bayou can't cast P-Fire. Slate Vial is like weirdly not that bad. But with the Trash Master in play, the game's just probably gonna be over by then. I kind of thought like a Snapcaster would happen here. You get to expert it. Good. I'm just maybe thinking about trophying the Trashman. So maybe like Hardcast. So we know their hand's P-Fire. Hardcast Force of Will is like on the radar here. So so Hardcast Force. Okay. It's like kind of a weird play to make when you have the Punishing Fire like in your hand. That's like kind of sus. But here I would play Pashlik. I would take this opportunity to resolve Pashlik. So then you have 2 3/3s, and both of them need to die. Pile driver is like the next best thing though, because it is lethal, right? The thing is like Pashlik resolving is it's effectively lethal, just as lethal as pile driver, because if they're at 6 and there's a Pashlik Mons in play, they are dead. Unless they like have a second Otawara, which would be ridiculous, or they can like bounce it with Jace and then kill the trash. Like, so like, and you can obviously just untap and you activate Pashlik and they die. So both lines are the same amount of lethal, and I would rather get the Pashlik in play because I think it's slightly better if things go wrong. Because if to kill something at all, they would take damage, and damage really matters here. Discards P-Fire Boseiju, waste on the port, Pernicious Deed, and they're dead on board. Bada bing, go. So punishing Dak. So I mentioned earlier that a fair matchup where I would shave Vial would be multiple Pernicious Deeds, and also Dak Faden is like a good punish for Vial. So it kind of depends on what number it's on. If it's on 4, then them sending your Vial isn't a big deal. But if it's on 3, then it's a pain in the ass, because then it can flash in Engineer, Evold, or Uro, and it like, that can be an Uro escaped out of nowhere. It's Vial and Uro, escape Uro. So let's see.
Pile would be dead first, but that's like an extra 2 damage if I needed it. Okay, over the finish line there. Beat a Punishing Fire. Jeez.
Yeah, Trashmaster is really good against Punishing Fire.
This is a Dak Faden Punishing Fire value engine deck thing. It has Hull Breacher and Notion Thief in it to get the thieves going. Pyroblast kills Hull Breacher, Notion Thief, and Dak. First can fight over the fire. I like Magus of the Moon.
First should be quite good.
Punishing Fire just answers that. Maybe I don't like Magus of the Moon. Surgical. They're also a loam deck. Opposition Agent, probably not where I want to be. Pile Driver. Yeah, their removal is not blue. It's red.
Yeah. So it's like, if kind of repeating earlier, but if the problem with the pile driver was that it wasn't resilient to removal, you would never run pile driver because there's almost no removal that pile driver is resilient to. It's just about forcing them to have the answers, and there's like certain and punching through blockers. Mostly about the blockers. It does dodge like Brazen Borrower, Teferi, Hydroblast, these types of things, but the common spot removal is never blue, right? So I think I do like these cards, but I also like these cards, and I think this is also an engineer matchup. So whenever there's an engineer matchup, you really don't want to cut on X2s because the situations you try to set up with an engineer in play, if you don't have like a clean answer, is get 2 X2s in play and then expert or jump helmet.
I actually like pile driver less than I like ringleader. The Trash Master won me that game, got me above the important 2-point threshold. Is this a vile matchup? We've seen Pernicious Deed and Dak. It's Fury is probably a Baleful Strix deck. Shave a Vile. Munitions Expert can pick off Dak or any of those creatures we mentioned.
So I think Shaving Jump Palm would be fine.
Now I know to save Wasteland for Punishing Fire. That's important.
I think I'd probably still bring in Magus, honestly, just because Punishing Fires are taxed and there's like a decent shot. Magus just like wins the game. Punishing Fire otherwise, it's just like maybe they cast it. You attack, they cast Punishing Fire, play Magus. If their Grove isn't up, then they lose.
They're also a lone Wasteland deck, which makes me want more Vials.
Yeah,
not less.
the tension between Vile and
Raider Maker kills
hedging against Deed and stuff.
Hull Breacher or Notion Thief as necessary. Pishalik Mons and Sling Gang are my combo kill. All right, maybe one Muxus, one Ringleader on the Shave because I'm cutting a bunch of Goblins.
Yeah, so I think just overboarding a little bit. I think I'd do like 3 blasts again, 1 Hearse, probably skip the Surgical. Bring in Magus. Yeah, yeah. Dak stealing Hearse could be a problem. Not that deck plays many ways to crew it, so it wouldn't be that bad. But it would be kind of annoying. So I think I would shave 1 to 2 Vials, 1 to 2 Skirks, probably 1 Lackey. No, Lackey's quite good on the play because they have a lot of 2 mana removal. Oh, you're on the draw, so shave Jump Palm, keep the pile drivers, keep Ringleader, keep Muxus.
Okay, let's do it this way.
Not sure if the math works out there, but
I'm gonna keep this one.
Yeah, this sounds good though.
I like the stability of Cavern. I like having an interactive graveyard object for the Punishing Fires. Kind of a slow hand, soft to Wasteland, but I'm willing to live in that world. They mulled to 6 and it polluted Delta for me. Ooh.
So here's the thing: it's like we have both our graveyard hate. We don't really want both. Like if one of these graveyard hate cards was a Goblin, probably happier.
Tormod's Whip.
Tormod's Whip is a very good name.
Cavern to start. I actually want to protect the Badlands more than I want to protect the second Cavern here.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. You're probably not
life and death.
You're probably not Pyroblasting on turn.
This hand relies on a DAC or something to try to.
You're basically only Pyroblasting 3 drops against this deck.
Or 3 mana. Brainstorm. I wouldn't have Pyroblasted that even if I could. That's not my game plan here.
Yep.
Fine, we planned for this.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Well played, Brian.
A Goblin. Rewarded. Get in there. Oh yeah. This is last turn they had a no shuffle Brainstorm.
Opponent's having some bad brainstorming.
And now they have done it again and missed a land drop for their trouble. But the cantrip. Goblins experts can yell at me in the
snap blasting this Ponder. Absolutely.
I'm going to Curse, so either way, Pyroblast flushes out the counterspell.
I can see it. Nice.
Or they can just concede on the spot for a 3-2 victory. Okay, 3-2 in this league with Goblins. Got obliterated by Reanimator. Had basically no chance game 1, and then I mulled low to Leyline, in game 2, which held for a while but died as soon as they could remove it.
Yeah.
I think I was like 1 turn away from maybe
Yeah.
being able to plow through a monster.
And
Like,
the
way the
matron
resources
call
came
was
together
tough.
that
I
game.
think matroning
But
for
lost to
Sling
Reanimator, which must
might,
be among the
might
worst
get you over the
matchups.
finish line, but I'd have to actually check
I'm
the
sure
math.
that you can stack your graveyard to beat that. Like if you just want 4 ley lines, 4 surgicals, 2 mindbreak traps, whatever.
Yeah.
But that's not how you win a tournament. That's how you beat a single deck. So I imagine the numbers Eli has chosen here are like aggregate good against the field.
Yep.
Our other loss was to Grixis control, which in game 1 we had a really interesting game where like I thought I was dying forever, and then they just like conceded around turn 7 to a Sling Gang Lieutenant,
Was
which felt
Kiki.
pretty great. And then they just had Plague Engineer backing up their removal in 2-for-1s in the subsequent games.
Yeah, I think the real problem with the Grixis matchup was just he didn't get to develop, right? Is like the game 2 missed a lot of land. He's like 3 lands in play on turn 8. And had some kind of bad cards with the pyrokinesis and misevaluated sideboarding a little bit, but like that's fine, obviously.
This is control background myself. I'm pretty comfortable with the Goblins matchup. I'm not going to say it's great, but like you have way more tools than like a Jeskai or Blue White or whatever would have against these go wide creature decks. And we had some really cool interactive games against Min on Jeskai. That was sick. The dredge one, I think, was the most exciting though. Just the finding the line on the last turn. My opponent making a mistake not bringing their Hogak back on the turn they had the window, and then using every card in my hand to Fury plus Narcomi plus Hearse. My opponent actually messed up that game twice. Like the turn they didn't cast Hogak, and then the turn that I played Hearse, they which I would have lost to, away a victory from the claws of defeat. Pretty cool, tricky little stuff here. I wish I understood the moving parts a little more. I know I left some value on the table, or like those games where it's like, do you start on Vile, back it up with Rishadenport, connect with Lackey with protection on turn 3, or do you just like high roll the Lackey?
Those are really tough calls.
Like sideboarding is tricky as well because everything has a job. It's really interesting that there's 3 pile drivers in the deck right now. That card was down to 1 for a long time. I haven't really been following Goblin technology, but being back up to 3 is, I imagine that's just to blast through Murktide Regents for the most part. Unbounceable with Teferi.
I think I want to mention a little bit about Pile Driver is that it's not just, it's about threat density, right? It's that, Goblins will deck up a ton of creatures, but only some of those creatures are actually threatening. It's the synergy thing I mentioned earlier. Is Goblins is the Pile Driver is the cheapest. Goblins payoff for like having Goblins on board is like, in terms of converting that into a win, Pile Driver is the cheapest option. And it scales better than the other like just kind of beat down creatures that exist. No other creature will deal as big a spike in damage as Pile Driver does. Yeah, and the secret mode of Pile Driver is against big creature decks. Like, if you were to play against a Maverick, or I guess green white depths these days, you can finagle situations so that your opponent has to trade their Knight or the Reclaimer with your Pile Driver, and so it kind of functions as an edict, basically, as long as you have sufficient pressure to back it up. But it's about tanking removal spells, about pushing damage for the minimum cost available, and being resilient to certain things, and also just being an X2, a cheap X2. Yeah.
Unblockable from Snapcaster Mage. Like, blue cards are back, but the removal is white, black, and red. So
also
Uro.
Uro's a big one.
Body to blast through combat is worth more than other options you could have here. Check out Eli's Patreon though to get the explanation on all of these choices, because this is a deck that comes out of a mad scientist lab. This is someone who has run the numbers. Like, 3 munitions expert, 1 gem palm incinerator. Why not the other way? Why not 4 of 1? Why not 2?
Yeah, so expert versus gem palm. The short pitch is expert is cheaper, or not cheaper, is more powerful because it generally deals 1 more damage, which is relevant as creatures in Legacy have larger, more and more toughness. It works with Vial better than Gem Palm, and is flippable off of Moxus, so it can snowball game and also kills Planeswalkers. So it's more applicable in a wider array of situations. But Gem Palm is still a key one of, because it's the only card that can draw a card other than, well, part of why I like Fable. It draws cards that aren't goblins. So like Ringleader can only find other goblins, Matron can only find other goblins. Gem Palm will just draw a card, so it can help you with your land drops. And it's purely red mana, so it's easier on the mana. And also it can be used purely off of Skirk. Those turns where you just pass with Gem Palm up, but you're actually tapped out, but you're just holding up removal off of Skirk Prospector. So I basically find that I always want 1 Gem Palm in my deck, but Expert being more widely applicable is the 3 of.
2 and 2. I don't know. Why 3 Goblin Pile Driver? 1 Fable and the Mirror Breaker.
So Fable is really powerful, but there's only so many non-goblins you can play in this deck. We're at 32 or 31. So you could cut the Fury and play a second Fable main, but that raises the curve a decent bit, and there's a lot of elves. So having Fury main is like a kind of like not quite a free win, but it's like a really good card to game 1 versus elves. Obviously, Fable and Fury work well together, and you know, there's only so many value 3-drops you can play, right? So I would like to play on power level. I would like to play 2 Fables, but I can only fit 1.
If that were actually a goblin, like if you could tutor that with Matron, if it was a tribal enchantment, it would make a ton of sense. But just like having that card in there kicking around, sure, why not? A lot of really cool choices that this is not a deck you can just pick up and win a tournament with. You got to do the homework, and you'll find that homework in Eli's Patreon.
Thanks, Brian.
Anyway, Luca, thank you for asking.
All right. Unrelated question. If you were to play Vandal over Opposition Agents, I would cut a mountain or a Badlands for Taiga. I think once you're in 3 colors, 7 colorless lands is a bit much. So I'd actually, well, 4 mountains in this build. Yeah, you can play 3 mountains, 3 Badlands, 6 fetches, 1 Taiga. Yeah. Got a mountain. Alternatively, cut a port and play a Taiga. Then you get more red sources in general, just be a bit more stable on the mana. Yeah, that's it for the video. Hope that was informative to everyone.
Asking me to play Goblin.
This was fun to go through. I think picked out some good spots. Brian's video really, I think, showed a lot that's cool about the deck. I appreciated that he also shouted me out so much. It was really nice of him. I have to go. I'm gonna call the stream there. Yeah, I'm going to a concert for my birthday. Hope you all enjoyed. I will post this on YouTube tonight, probably. Hope everyone enjoyed, and see someone to raid. Tutor's playing the Legacy Challenge. He's playing Modern, but he's probably still in the Legacy Challenge. Yeah, alright. We'll send tutors. Alright, thanks for watching, folks. Next time.